Hi guys, it's Corrine. Thanks so much for stopping by. Today we are making a very simple A2 sized card, which is 4¼ by 5½, with an ink blended panel. I wanted to make a thank you card, so I went ahead and made a few of them while I was in the process. I pulled out my Misty stamping tool and I'm using the Misty corners. That way I can get perfect placement of that card panel, because I'm using a background stamp from Echo Park, A Perfect Christmas, and it's a beautiful plaid background. I did add a little adhesive behind my card panel, which is also cut to 4¼ by 5½, but I will be cutting that down to put on the front of my card. I treated that with an anti-static tool to get rid of any excess oil, and I'm using my Versamark. I'm going to ink that up and stamp it down. I like using my brayer to really give me a good impression, and I'm going to do that twice. And this will give me a nice stamp impression. I'm cleaning off my stamp and then I'll set my Misty aside. I'm going to emboss this with some white detail embossing powder from Hero Arts. I'm going to go ahead and lay on a bunch of it and pick it up with my tweezers just to try and keep my fingers out of it as much as possible. I'll go ahead and get rid of any excess that's on the front of my card panel and put back all the rest back into the jar. I did edit this down a little bit, but what you don't see is that I had my heat tool heating up for quite a little while before I took it to my panel, and then I heat set it. Once you see that it's all melted and shiny, you know that it's heat set. Here I'm going to ink blend. I did add this to a scrap piece of paper with my ATG gun, and I pulled out some Distress Oxides. I pulled out picked raspberries, peacock feathers, and fossilized amber. And I was doing a lot of ink blending this day, and I had my card panel taped down to a scrap piece of paper, and then I can hold on to the scrap piece of paper, which stops it from moving around, but it still was slightly moving on my glass work surface. So I remember seeing a video that Jennifer McGuire did where she used a sticky mat. So I went ahead and gave it a try, and it worked really well. So I added my scrap piece of paper right to an old Cricut mat that I have, and it really holds it in place when you're doing a lot of ink blending. I don't know that I would pull this out just to do one panel, but I did several this day. So I pulled it out and it really did make a difference. Excuse me. It really held it in place and made it much easier to work with. So I'm just going over these diagonally, and I'm going to do them several times until I get the blend that I want. I'm using a blender brush, going back and forth with each color. I'm working on Neenah Classic Crest Solar White 80-pound cardstock, so it does blend nicely, and that's what I will use for my card base as well. I'm using the 80-pound, like I mentioned. And then I'll use my little scraper tool to help get that panel off, since I did use some ATG tape to adhere it down to hold it in place. Now I'm just taking a paper towel and buffing off any excess ink that sits on top of the embossing, and I love when that white plaid shows up. Super pretty. And then here's a few others that I did that I will cut down and make other cards with as well. Now I'm going to score my piece of cardstock that is cut to 11 by 4¼ scoring it at 5½ to give me a top folding card. And I'll use my bone folder to give myself a good crease on that. And to the top of this card base, I do add a black piece of cardstock as a mat and a white piece of cardstock as a mat. I forget to cut the white piece at this time, so I'll remember a little bit later and I'll go back and cut it. But this black piece of cardstock is cut to 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. And then the white piece that I will put on top of that will be cut to 4 by 5 1/4. And then this ink blended panel I will cut to 3 1/4 by 4. Just to go to the bottom of my card. And you'll see me cutting it slightly down because I wanted to make sure to get all the colors in there. So I went back and forth to cut it until I got it to the 3 1/4 by 4 inch size that I wanted. Now here I'm cutting down a strip of black to go at the top of my ink blended panel, and I do use that on one of the cards that I make. However, for the card that I'm making on video, I end up using a die cut, which I'll show you that in the end. I changed my mind and used a die cut for it. So here I'm going to pull out some pink cardstock that matched really well with the blended panel. If you don't have any cardstock that matches well, you can ink blend it with the peacock feathers or the picked raspberries, something that matches in your ink blended panel that you've already made. I'm using the Pretty Pink Posh stitched stripes, or strips, die cut rather, and I pulled out my Vagabond and I'm going to run that through, and that's what I changed my mind and run through a black piece of cardstock so it has that stitching detail as well to match for one of my cards later. I'm using the piece that's approximately about 3/4 of an inch. And then I'm pulling out La La Land Crafts Stitched Bow Die. It's the Stitched Bow 3. Super cute little die. I'm cutting it from pink cardstock. And while I have my die cutting machine out, I go ahead and cut it from some glitter paper, some silver glitter paper as well. And off camera, I cut it from some black paper. I wasn't sure which color I wanted to go with for the bow. So I like to, when I pull them out, I like to make several bows at once because I always use bows on cards or projects. I have a little bin in my room that I keep them in. For that glitter paper, I'm using a metal shim that really gives me a nice die cut with it. And then I'll just poke those out with my Tim Holtz craft pick. So I think I made about 5 or 6 bows, but I'll skip past most of that. And now to show you that I like to take my bone folder and just kind of crease that paper, get the paper going in the direction you want. It's going to break up the fibers in the paper and make it a little bit easier to glue together. And I'm using a little bit of Beacon Fabri-Tac, put right in the middle, and then put those down and hold them together with these little clamps. I think I got them from from Home Depot maybe. I got them quite a while ago. I like to hold those together, give them a minute to dry. And now I'm going to go ahead and put my card together, adding some ATG tape to the back. You can use wet glue as well. That panel again is 4 1/8 by 5 3/8, and here's where I remember I needed a white piece of cardstock that I'm going to cut to 4 by 5 1/4. So I'm going to use the same Nina cardstock so it all matches. That'll mat right on the black, and then I'll adhere that as well with the ATG. I'm going to adhere that towards the bottom of my card, and then I'll use those strips that I cut from the die cut right at the edge there between the white and the pink. I'm pulling out some sentiment stamps. I was making a thank you card, so what I decided on was the Simon Says Stamp Big Thanks word stamp set. So I'm just kind of placing that in my MISTI to see where it's going to be before I stamp it down. And for that, I'm going to use some VersaFine black onyx ink. This gives you a really nice impression, and I will stamp that twice. Again, using my brayer just to really press it down. going to ink that and stamp it up again. I wanted to get that black mark off because my card was a little dimensional at this point, being that there were a few layers, so I didn't want that to get on that white panel. So I thought I would clean that off quickly before stamping it the second time. And that gave me a really nice impression. And now my pink panel that I cut down, I went ahead and cut that to 4 inches, and this one as well. Again, using some Beacon Fabri-Tac, I'm going to adhere both of those down, layering them right where that panel meets the white. And now I'm just gonna see which bows I like. In the end, I ended up making one with each color. I show in this video the one I made with a black one and the one I made with a silver, but I did make one with pink as well, and it turned out really pretty. I'm just kind of pushing those bows to give them some dimension. Adhering that down, and then I'll pull out some enamel dots and some pearls to decide what I wanted to go into the center of that bow. That die cut does come with a centerpiece, but I tend not to use it. I like to add something dimensional like an enamel dot. So I'm using a little bit of art glitter glue, just a little dab of it, and I'm going to add a pink enamel dot. And once that dry, that doesn't come up. And here I'm going back, I'm adding some pink clay hearts that I have. These are from the Foiled Fox. They're little clay hearts, and I'm going to add 3 of them just scattered on each card. Again, using a little bit of art glitter glue and a jewel picker to pick them up to put them in place. And that's all there was to it. If you have any questions, please leave me a comment. I hope you enjoyed today's process. Thanks so much for stopping by, and have a great day.